Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. Here is Tony from New Zealand, and with me on the show I have John Haller, who most of you who watch this channel will be well familiar with. I have John quite regularly as a guest, so welcome, John. It's good to be talking to you again.
Good to be back. And it's good to be inside in a nice air-conditioned room with my little fan going.
Well, here it's winter, so I am in a room that's heated. So... Not that it's too cold, actually.
You guys are all upside down there. So.
Well, it's actually pretty mild for winter at the moment in terms of temperature, but we've certainly had some crazy weather here, which I won't go into too much, but certainly something really strange going on with the weather, in my opinion. I haven't seen anything quite like it before. So, I guess... there are many things we could talk about, but I thought I'd like to just start off with the economy and what's going on. For a start, looking at the stock market today, stocks slide to the lowest since December 2020 amid renewed recession concerns. This is from Yahoo Finance. US stocks sank Thursday as investors weighed the potential economic costs of the Federal Reserve's ongoing fight with inflation. The S&P fell by 3.25% to the lowest since December 2020. The NASDAQ plunged more than 4%, and the Dow sank by 741 points, or 2.4%, to close below 30,000 for the first time since January 2021. So that's the stock market going down. I mean, it's really, I've been watching it's going down a lot. And then we've got the Federal Reserve raising interest rates yesterday, killing basically any hopes of avoiding a recession.
The largest interest rate increase in 30 years in one day. So the interest rates are still sort of low historically. You know, when Pam and I got married and we bought our first house in 1980, the interest rates were in the double digits, like 11, 12, 13. Even some people were paying 17, 18%. My in-laws, they had CDs. They didn't really need to worry about investing in the stock market because they could just put whatever money they had in a CD and they could get 18, 20, 21% on the CD for a few years. I mean, anybody would love to get that now. So it's certainly a very big turnaround from what it was just a couple weeks ago. I mean, I think we're in an era of stagflation.
Yes.
Where you're going to see inflation but no growth. It's so bizarre though, because we hear all of these things about inflation and supply chains and that type of thing. First of all, I've not seen a lot of shortages. I do the shopping mostly. Yeah. Mainly because if I do the shopping, then we get to eat what I want, but which may or may not be a good thing now that I think about it. But yesterday I went to Sam's Club, which is a big warehouse discounter, and it was the first time I've noticed they have these big racks that are full on top. You don't know what's in the back room, but on the floor, it's usually from the floor to the first shelf is packed.
Yeah.
And I would say in the food area, about 50% of that area was only like one layer of thing on a pallet underneath each shelf. And I've never seen that before. A few weeks ago, I went to buy, we're out of romaine lettuce, head lettuce and romaine lettuce. And I went to a store and they didn't have any. So I went to another store and it was like over twice as much as I had paid just a month before. And it looked like they, drug it behind a truck all the way from California to Ohio. It looked awful and it was pathetic. But then the other day I went to Meijer and I needed head lettuce and romaine and they've got this, I've never seen heads of lettuce like this. And so I'm wondering what is going on? Are they trying to keep us calm? Am I in kind of a unique area? Because I see pictures that my friends post on Facebook from where they live, and they've got whole rows of empty shelves in their stores. So I just don't know how I can get a handle on what's going on. But there is a food shortage coming. There's just I talk about this in my Bible prophecy updates, the convergence of events that we see all the time. You have somewhat by the war in Ukraine, which is affecting a large chunk of the world's wheat, corn, sunflower oil, and some other commodities that are grown there. There's actually at the Atlantic Council, which is kind of I don't know if I'd call it neocon, but sort of a leaning neocon type think tank that focuses on world events. They're globalists, but they had a very interesting article a couple of months ago that said Ukraine could feed the world. And I think if Ukraine was properly managed, it probably has rich enough farmland to feed a large chunk of the world. But now they're not producing. What they harvested last year is stuck in silos and that type of thing. There's reports that Russia's stealing some of it and trying to ship it down to Turkey. But they're not going to get all that out. That stuff is gone. It appears that the farmers were able to plant most of the crop this year, as long as they didn't get blown up by a mine that had been laid during the war. But then the question is going to be, how are they going to harvest it? Because now we're running into a severe diesel shortage, and you're not going to get diesel into Ukraine except by probably train. Russia's shutting down the pipelines. They've blockaded the ports. There's only one port that's still in Ukrainian control, and that's pretty weak. So you have that problem. Then you have, like in America, the Texas winter wheat crop was, I've read, somewhere around 7% of normal. And that's usually like a 20% of the wheat crop in the United States each year that they use. So it's only 7%. So you're talking like a big chunk that's missing. There was hopes that there were other countries that could step in and grow things. But for example, Germany was growing, thought they would have a good crop, but they had a massive storm, hailstorm and everything that just pretty much destroyed the crop that was there. And so you have these weather events that are just popping up. I mean, they're not unprecedented. I've seen weather events like this before, but not in the context of all these other things. And there's farmers in the United States that they can't grow because they can't get the fertilizer. Now they're having trouble with getting diesel. And it's a very complex problem. So, our president, the guy the presidential front man here in the United States.
The most prominent puppet that you see, yes.
Yeah, I call it the Biden administration because I really think I know who's running things behind it, because it's just a retread of all the crazy ideas they had then, except now they're really doing them. And they're working hard at them because I think the political situation looks like they're going to get hammered in the election in November. They're just going to get destroyed if there's an election in November. And I still am of the contention. I think I saw you did a thing with Leo Hohmann recently. Pretty sure Leo Hohmann, in fact, I think I've heard Leo Hohmann say this, that he thinks that they're going to institute something to cut back on conservatives voting, and that will be requiring a vaccine to vote. People say, well, how are they going to do that? And I'm just saying is, how they've been able to do all the stuff they've done for the last 2 years, it's been this slow rolling, complete takedown of all of our freedoms.
Totally, and it's ongoing. Just a couple of little things. I'll just quickly. The weather here has been crazy too. Like we've had in the towns around me, like 4 tornadoes in the last couple of weeks, and thunder and lightning storms like I've never seen before. I mean, tornadoes are not something you not see very often in New Zealand, and then to have 4 of them, in a couple of weeks is unprecedented. And also,
Really?
I was thinking, just very off the track, but you mentioned Sam's Club before. I saw an article not too long ago on Fox News about how Sam's Club is bringing in driverless trucks. So they'll be,
Yes.
that's another thing to get rid of the need for a human workforce if they're cutting back on the number of people and so forth. So I thought that's interesting, but we won't go there. But
Well, they had a massive warehouse just outside of Indianapolis in Plainfield, Indiana, which was close to where my sister lived before she passed away, and it was destroyed in a fire. And I mean, and they're talking to people. They're looking for jobs for the people that work there. There were several thousand people that work there. It's a major distribution facility. I don't know how much food they handle. It might be just dry goods and other things that they handle. But we've had this. There's just been this series of all of these food plants, food processing plants, warehouses, that type of thing that have been destroyed in fires. Now, I don't know. I think it's a two-step inquiry. We've only looked at, these things have fires. And I think the list is now over 100 in the last 6 months in the United States in food distribution or processing facilities. And so the question is, well, then what impact is that having on the food supply? That's the second question, because I don't know how long they're offline or anything like that. So it's just this crazy convergence of events. I mean, the last few days, the heat indexes here in Central Ohio, we're still a week away from summer starting officially, 5 days, I guess, 4 or 5 days. And we've had heat indexes up to 109 degrees. I mean, the other night I went out of my garage at 10 o'clock and the temperature gauge in the garage said 97 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. And it's been brutally hot. That's affecting things. Now there's a report like out in Kansas that there were, and you can see the videos on Twitter and Facebook, there were 10,000 head of cattle, feed cattle at a feedlot that died. Now that can happen, but it's like, what else is going to happen? So you have, but the big concerns I have are, you have pressure on the supplies from the war in Ukraine, but elsewhere they did a thing at the UN a month ago. I think it was either just before or just after the World Economic Forum met. And there was I think her first name was Sarah Blinker or something like that, from South Africa, and she's a food expert. She works for some, sort of NGO think tank. And she said, listen, it's just not Ukraine. There's been a whole lot of things like the soil's extra dry down in South America. It's not going to produce as much. We have a major drought in the southwestern United States. Lake Powell is now at about, it's either 21 to 27% of its capacity. That's a major dam in the Colorado River. It produces a lot of electrical power. It did produce a lot of electrical power for the southwestern United States. That power is now gone. They've had to shut down. They can't generate electricity. Lake Mead in Nevada, outside of Las Vegas, is very close to being put into the same category. Here in my town in Columbus, Ohio, we have had, for the last 3 days, we have had rolling blackouts in Columbus, Ohio. Now, that's again part of a very complex thing, but it was inevitable that when we would have a situation like this, and so the National Electrical Reliability Council publishes a report, which I used in one of my updates, and they are expecting, particularly in the West and the upper Midwest, not here. In the report, it was like, we should be okay. But now where's the first place they're having rolling blackouts is Columbus, Ohio.
Well, I was due to interview Mike from On Point Preparedness a couple of days ago, and he's in Cincinnati, and we couldn't do the show because he had a power blackout as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, so if I disappear in the midst of this, so I have a generator, but it doesn't keep the place where I get the internet connection is governed by power. I don't have a generator on that. So Our lights did flick off the other day, but yeah, I saw your note that he couldn't do the show. But we've had 230,000, up to 230,000 customers, not people, but customers in the Columbus metro area that have been without power. That includes some major shopping centers. It's included they've shut down a couple buildings downtown, state employees usually, I guess because they're, sad to say, they're largely expendable. I guess they figure that we can get by without them. But, there's a 30-story building next to the building where I work, and it's been without power for a few days. And so I noticed I went to a restaurant last night to pick up food. I've never seen this in 3 years. I haven't seen this restaurant this busy. And you go into like a Costco or a Sam's Club or something like that, and they have that little food court area. It's packed. It's wall to wall people because people are going there because it's the only place they can go to get cool. I'd seen the same thing happen in Southern California a couple times when we were out there when it was really hot, because a lot of people in Southern California don't have air conditioning anyway. But anyway, so you had this convergence of this weather. You have power grids in Texas. They're expecting problems. They've already had them here in Ohio. Now, part of that, Tony, and I could talk a long, long time about this, but there's this thing that comes out of the World Economic Forum, and it's called ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance.
Yeah.
Essentially, what that is a social credit score for corporations. And so what happens is they have these corporations to getting these ESG scores. And Glenn Beck and others have reported that customers at brokerage houses like Merrill Lynch, they're actually getting their statement, and on their statement there will be a ESG score down there. It's a social credit score. Now, the pushing of that social credit score, I did a midweek update last week. People might want to go watch it, but just to summarize real quickly, there are actually 4 major conferences in the world now that meet, global conferences where the globalists get together. You have Davos in the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. You have the World Government Summit in the United Arab Emirates. And now you have the FII Institute, the Financial Innovation Investment Initiative Institute in Saudi Arabia. And then you also have the St. Petersburg SPIEF, St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And that's actually meeting this week or next week. And the St. Petersburg one is the largest attended of all of these. But there was a guy in Saudi Arabia at the FII Institute. He said, we're one of the 3 great global gatherings. So he was sort of right. There are really 4. But what the FII Institute, which is funded by Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, it's one of his brainchilds. It's to implement Saudi Vision 2030. And what they push through that is this very extensive, elaborate ESG scheme to roll into corporations. Now, we know, so what's happening is that the ESG scores are leading to a shutdown in the investment that's capital that comes to fund oil and gas exploration because it's not environmentally sensitive. So that's being funded, amazingly, by Saudi Arabia. It's also in the push for it in the United States, in the back rooms, all of these groups, these left-wing green groups that push this, they are funded to a great extent by Russia. Now, why would that happen? Well, because Russia and Saudi Arabia have effectively cut down the ability of the West and countries that can produce oil and gas to produce less. That leads to the supply and demand issues. The demand is still there. The supply is down. The price goes up. And guess who's still pumping, the biggest gas supplies reserves in the world are in Russia. The second biggest oil supplies in the world are in Saudi Arabia. And so what happens is that this is a large part of inflation. It's the And China pushes it too, because China's behind the social credit thing. So they're pushing it through the World Economic Forum, these other organizations, and it's really causing the price of gas and oil to go up. And the Saudis and Russians are sitting there. Russia got more money this last year than they've ever gotten. The ruble is at an all-time high. So all the economic sanctions that are hurting us in the United States and elsewhere more than Russia, they're hurting us. And so it's this, and so the Saudis and Russians are sitting there, they're just reaping the world, they're reaping from an oil boom that they're having because the price is up. And I don't know if you saw Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, which has its main operations here in Columbus. There's a office building near 10 minutes from my house that's probably the size of the Pentagon, that Bank One, or not, I call it Bank One, JP Morgan Chase has. And Jamie Dimon was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he said, well, a month ago, he was saying, yeah, I'm seeing storm clouds and it could be bad. And now, he's doing like the weathermen do around here, is when it actually happens. Oh yeah, I knew this was coming. And now he's saying we're going to have a hurricane.
Yeah.
And the question is, what size is the hurricane? And I think most people that I'm reading, some people that I trust for investment advice are, there's one guy that I follow, and he's had some updates and advice the last 3 days. I listened to the first day. I haven't been able to bring myself to listen to the last 2 hours of what he's put up, because it's very dark. It's just, and this is global. Now, I don't know if it's affecting you guys down there in in New Zealand. And I'm sorry, I was thinking of the nanny, the nanny that runs your country.
Oh yeah, Jacinda.
And so I don't know how it's affecting you down there, but it's affecting everywhere.
Well,
and
it is affecting us here, and our housing market's starting to go down quite big as well. And our Reserve Bank raised interest rates before the Federal Reserve did. I guess is a bit of an indicator, really, where this is heading. But no, we've got the whole inflation thing going on here, and supply chain issues and all of that as well. And petrol prices, the highest they've been.
So what do you pay for a liter of gas?
Basically, most places now are over $3 a litre in New Zealand. The last gas I bought, there's some places I shop around in a town not far from me where it tends to be cheaper, and I paid about $2.88, I think, or $2, something like that. But most places are over $3.
Is that New Zealand dollars?
That's New Zealand dollars, yeah.
Do you know what the exchange rate is to the?
Well, I haven't looked. I think it's around about 65 cents New Zealand to a US dollar. So basically, it's a heck of a lot more expensive to buy petrol here than it is in America. And we're talking in litres, not gallons. So
right,
yeah.
So yeah, here in the US, so I do see it's 0.64 according to the thing I just popped up.
Yeah.
So a New Zealand dollar is equal to 0.64 of a US dollar. Yeah. And here it's hard to find it under $5 a gallon.
Yes. When I was in America last, which is like, not 2 years ago, since I left there, we were paying $2, about $2.38 or something, I remember, a gallon at the time. So it's pretty much more than double what it was then.
Easily.
Yeah.
So so that's having impact. Now diesel is even higher. And the problem is that so much of our economy runs on diesel.
Yeah.
All trucking, all rail, shipping. And then you have these continual rolling lockdowns of 20 to hundreds of millions of people in China, which is affecting the production of goods, which is affecting the supply chain. But now here, some companies are not doing well financially because nobody's buying anything. So they have plenty of stuff on the shelves because nobody wants to spend the money.
Yeah.
And this has been look, I've been through up and downs before. I mean, the 1980s, 79, 80 with Carter, 73, the Arab oil crisis, 2008 with the collapse of Lehman Brothers Bank.
Yeah.
And I actually did a lot of work for what survived the Lehman Brothers. They kind of rolled the bank off into a separate entity, and I did legal work for years on loans and that type of thing. So I'm a little familiar with it. This one is different. This one is very different. So the banks, because of the COVID thing, the banks are not putting things into foreclosure like they should. I got a report from a local real estate guy, and he said, in this quarter, there's about $38 billion of these mortgage-backed securities, commercial properties that have to be rolled over and refinanced. That's unprecedented. And the question is, but what are they worth? Because rental demands are down about 25% across the board because of COVID and work from home, that sort of thing. So that will roll into lower property values, but then they can't get the financing to pay off the loans. And I'm being told by bank consultant friends that I have is the banks are going to run out the string as far as they can. Because if they went after everybody that they could go after right now, this is a quote from a very trusted banking consultant guy that I've known for years. He said this would be way worse than the Depression if the banks went after it. Yet you should also know that large banks around Columbus area and Ohio are seeking to hire dozens and dozens of asset managers because they have to manage these assets. If they're not going to put them into foreclosure and just, get control of them, they're going to have asset managers. So there are not a lot of foreclosures, but there's a lot of stuff like, it's sort of like a tsunami coming in. The water doesn't go up that high, but underneath it's going to cause tremendous turmoil depending on how it's managed. And I've never seen anything like it. I'm thankful to the Lord I'm 68 years old because I don't know. I don't know what this looks like in 6 months.
Well, yeah, the storm clouds are like gathering on so many fronts. I mean, it's already started raining, if you know what I'm saying, but you can see that it's just going to get much worse. It has to, because there are so many factors all lining up, all at the same time. Yeah,
and it's sort of the convergence of this. It's sort of a perfect storm type thing. Yeah. So speaking of a tsunami, so just north of us, we thought we were going to get hit, but it went just about 30 minutes north of us. A thing called a derecho. I don't know if I don't know if these things exist elsewhere in the world. And the way to describe it is as a above the ground tsunami. I was caught in one back in 2012. I was in Richmond, Indiana, about 100 miles away. And Pam called me and she said, "You better get home. There's a storm coming." And so I looked on my weather app and everything. And I could see it coming. And it was about 450 miles from north to south. And I drove like 95 miles an hour across Interstate 70, and the storm caught me about 20 minutes from home. And it started, and I was able to, within about a half a minute, get behind a big truck repair place and pull up right against the building. And Tony, it was like a wave coming through the atmosphere for 25 minutes, 100-mile-an-hour wind, straight line. We lost power for 4 days. Well, they had that up in Northwest Ohio, Michigan. And it's a perfect metaphor for what's coming on the financial side. And we've now had another direction. They had one out, Pastor Bill out there in Cedar Rapids, who went to be with the Lord, but they had one last year in in eastern Iowa, and it was it was probably stronger than the one I was in back in 2012, and it just causes just extreme devastation. And that's sort of like all these little silos of things, economics and money and banking and property values and food prices and petrol prices and gas supply and this supply and supply chains and all. It's like they're all sort of like blowing through at the same time.
Yes.
And it's very turbulent. And this is the world we live in. So then the question is, what happens to a world like that? It could be very chaotic. In the Middle East, which is an area that I follow, most of the countries in the Middle East get way above 50%, up to 80% of their wheat from Ukraine. They're not getting wheat from Ukraine. It's questionable whether other people are going to be able to fill in the supply shortfall. It was 10 years ago, actually just 11 years ago, that the Arab Spring started in 2011. And a large part of that was because of drought and food shortages led to riots and that type of thing in Tunisia, then in Syria, and here we are 10 years later, 11 years later, still fighting the same thing, where a worse shortage, economic hit appears to be coming to those countries. And then the question is, what happens? And none of the answers to that I think, are good things. It's very chaotic.
Yes, I can see food riots and things will start because when people get hungry, they get desperate, and a lot of people are not going to be able to afford food if they can even get it. The way things are going with inflation, the way it is, and obviously with gas prices going up, that's going to force food prices up everywhere as well. So it's like a spiral downwards, and then, like I say, when people get desperate, well, you get ram raiding buildings, and to try and people get things out of them, looting and so on, and then desperate people will just start rioting, and I can see that in the future, maybe not too far away.
And that's somebody who's a totalitarian. That's a dream situation for them to rise. So we sort of live at this time of the prophetic history timeline, where all of these things that happen, I think, are very significant as to how those things are going to play out in the future. I'm not a prophet. I don't know exactly how they're going to come about. Somebody who listens to and I talk about these things, and I try not to. I don't share some of the stuff that I have because it's just too dark. It's just too. It's depressed. It would be very depressing for people. As a friend of mine from Australia, who had been watching my updates for years, used to live here in the States, and he said, your 2022 updates have been such downers that I'm going back to listen to the ones you did in 2020 to cheer myself up. So, and they keep playing out this thing with the pandemic and the Charlie Vector thing and the treatment for Charlie Vector. And I don't know if you saw the news that Fauci is now at home because he has the
CV. Yeah.
Yeah. But he's very grateful that he has all the treatment, but there's a lot of information coming out from different, some of the documents have had to be released. I'm just telling you there's something really strange going on with all of this stuff. I mean, we know what's going on.
Yeah.
And they try so that we're having these hearings in the United States on January 6th, committee in the House of Representatives. Yeah. And it's just this big fake show thing. There were people who did bad things, who planned to do bad things. They weren't successful. They didn't overturn anything. But there's this constant push to turn you and me, because we share truth about what's going on, And now that's been weaponized by our government through, the Department of Homeland Security bulletin issued on February 7th. And I listened to people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, other countries talk, and everybody talks about, what do they talk about? We got to root out misinformation. And in the United States, they've weaponized it to call it misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And malinformation essentially means it could be truthful, but it goes contrary to the accepted narrative. And you hear people in government, Nancy Pelosi was saying why we have to have these hearings on January 6th, because we have to set forth the narrative. We have to tell people what the narrative is, what they're supposed to believe. And this stuff lines up very well with Bible prophecy and what we see is going to happen in this last period, if this is, and I think it is, this last period of human history. It's tough, but we got to remember God's in control. Nothing's escaping his gaze. But it's, people need to understand what's going on so they can prepare and make plans.
And that is, I think, probably an important point to bring out as we, sort of get on towards the end of this. People need to realize this is really going on and pray what they should do. How should they prepare? Does God want them to do something if they haven't already done so? Because food shortages are coming more. Gas shortages, power shortages, all of these things. What can people do to be prepared for what lays ahead and probably not too far away? I think everyone should be praying, God, what do you want us as individuals to do to be ready? Obviously, being spiritually prepared is number one, but I think there are physical preparations that people should look to do now if they haven't already done so. And even if you have, what more can you do, if possible? Because it's going to come through like a freight train.
If all this blows over, then you've got some extra food around that you can eat up. I mean, that's really,
yeah.
I don't know some people get very upset that you're not trusting the Lord if you prepare and that type of thing. So my analogy is this. We know that the Lord could walk on water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm only aware of him doing that once. Every other time he took a boat. So, be practical. Sure, don't expect the miracle. That's the rare thing. And we can do things. And I do not know. I don't think it's a lack of faith or anything like that. If God gives you a mind to be able to think through things and see things coming and to make preparations for that, this appears to be worldwide. Yes. As well. I mean, this is everywhere. China is in terrible economic shape. Japan, and I read everywhere that there's a collapsing fertility rate all over the world that causes other pressures on taking care of old people. It's just like it's like a hurricane, and it's coming. It's a hurricane with a big tsunami. And I don't know how bad it's going to be. People survive tsunamis, right? But they can cause extreme devastation. And listen, this is a period of time where God's going to, I think, pour out his judgment a bit. And or not a bit, a lot. Yeah. And what are you going to do? You're just going to stand there. I used to use a video at the end of some of my talks where it's from the Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean and the Indian Ocean back in 2004.
Yeah.
And one of the pictures is a guy. And what happened was the water drains out of the bay. And everybody's looking around like, oh, look, there's a coral reef. Let's walk out and look at the pretty coral and let's look at the underside of the boat and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you see some people, they're filming it and they go, what's that on the horizon? You see this like white cap across the horizon. They're like, is that a tsunami? No, that's not a tsunami. And then it's like 20 seconds go by and they start going, tsunami. And you see the local people who understand what's coming. They're running for the hills. They're running off the beach. And there's other guys. And there's this one guy standing there in the bay and and he's dead. I mean, he did not survive this. Yeah. And this is I think a perfect picture of what we should expect in the end times. And we gotta, prepare. And if we need to, flee. Now, right now, I get called all the time, people or messaged all the time, where would you go? Where should we go? What should we do? And be honest with you, Tony, I don't know. I mean, I've got friends in Ecuador and I've got friends in other countries, and they're telling me it's bad down there. There's just a lot of turmoil. I mean, they're all coming to America, it seems like, to get across our open southern border. It's just everything's insane.
So I've mentioned it before a number of times on the show, and I still I'll just say it again, probably with the boy in the Bible with the feeding of the 5,000. There was a boy that had a few loaves and a few fish, and he gave them to Jesus, and Jesus multiplied them and fed the multitude. But it took somebody to have something, to have done some preparation and have some things there, and then being prepared to share it and not be selfish. And then Jesus multiplied it. And I think, looking at it that way, people should prepare. I mean, they're saying, well, we're going to trust the Lord, but if you have something, then God can multiply it. And if you're generous with it, he can multiply it and help other people as well. So I just want to use that as an analogy. Trusting God can still mean being prepared. That boy was prepared. So, we're going to face really difficult times. I mean, already many people are, but I think it's going to get a lot worse as the days go on. So everyone should individually seek God as to how they should prepare, what they should do, but don't do nothing. That would be my closing thoughts on it. So, we should look to wrap up. John, have you got anything that you want to share just before we do?
No, I just think that, people should be, be in the Word. That's going to be where your hope and joy and comfort and that type of thing do. I would also encourage you to get together to the extent that you can, with other Christians, because I think that's also important.
Yeah, fellowship is going to be important, and especially with like-minded people. You're going to find out who your real friends are and who is really trustworthy and who are really solid, Yeah,
we've noticed at our church, which is skewed older, all of a sudden we have people coming with children, and because they're looking for their start for fellowship and everything. And so hopefully we'll be able to fill in that little gap.
So as to close, can you tell people where they find you again online?
Yeah, you can go to YouTube, although there's some things I don't talk about on YouTube, as you know, that's kind of a tricky thing. We put all of our sermons from Fellowship Bible Chapel. So it'd be at Fellowship Bible Chapel channel on YouTube, John Haller. You can also get me in the church, Real FBC, all one word, on Rumble. Brighteon, I think we're on also. That's Fellowship Bible Chapel. We're still trying to get a podcast going, but we're all volunteers, so it's been a multi-year project and we haven't gotten it done. And then Remnant Truth Network, rtntv.org. And there's also an app for that, and so you'll at least find my prophecy updates on that, some of my teachings. Okay, cool. Well, thanks, John. We'll have to do this again soon. We had a lot of other issues we could have tapped into, but this has been a pretty important one, I think, just covering what we have. So thanks, and we'll have to be back in touch again. God bless. Thanks so much, Tony. Folks, make sure that you go to A Minute to Midnight. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to us on our website, aminutetomidnight.com. Go down the right-hand side of the page and enter your email address to receive notifications of all of our shows and so forth. A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations. If you want to help us, it's always much appreciated, and you can do that at aminutetomidnight.com as well. The music used, I've written, played and recorded, and you can download free music on our website too if you want to. So that is it for this. God bless, stay safe, and take note, do some preparation if you haven't already done so.